Hello everyone, and welcome back to another session of AP Human Geography with Mr. Elrod. We are still in Unit 1, and today we're going to continue on with our 5 themes of geography, or 5 themes of spatial interaction, and we're going to talk about movement. So when we think about movement, maybe that doesn't come to mind as something that's incredibly important, but within geography, this idea of spatial interaction is going to be highly important. And so when we consider movement, first of all, let's talk about what exactly we're talking about when we say the word movement. We're talking about how or where do things move within a given space. Now, we're not just talking about people. Of course, when we think about movement, we typically think about people. Now, people are very important because people carry not just maybe their clothing or diseases or currency, those types of things, but they also carry with them maybe even something more powerful, which might be ideas. And ideas could be anything from like politics to religion to philosophy, any of those types of things. And we know that the movement of those things from one place to another can be just as powerful as the movement of anything else from one place to another. You think about the movement of Christianity all over the world, from Jesus Christ and Jerusalem, to the movement of Islam all over North Africa and Southwest Asia. You think about the movement, the impact of Buddhism, the impact of Hinduism. So all of these, and you think about not just where they start, but also where they end up and the impact on those places. So all that's going to be very important. So thinking about the movement of not just people, we can also think about the movement of things like goods. So this could be agricultural produce. This could be technological goods and innovation, those types of things. And then you can also think about information. So when you look at like people and goods, these are tangible items that are being moved from one place to another, which are going to have a great impact on an area in the landscape and those types of things. But when we talk about ideas and information, of course, we're talking about things that are intangible but can have a tremendous amount of impact. And you also notice that those two categories, whether we're talking about goods and people, the tangible things, or the ideas and the information, you think about the way they travel, they really travel in very different ways. And the way that innovation has developed over time, innovation technology has developed over time, has caused them to travel in several different ways. And so that's kind of a great impact on our landscape, especially because how quickly today things like information and ideas are going to travel, as well as goods and as well as people. So when we talk about movement, it's really not just the movement of one thing from one place to another, but it's really about spatial interaction. How do spaces interact with each other, and how do people from one space to another interact with each other through movement? And what are the different ways that we can see an impact of one place on another through the movement of people and goods, ideas, information, things like that? How can we see the impact on that particular landscape, whether it be the physical landscape or whether it be the cultural landscape? How are we going to see the impact that those two things have on another? And you could think either in your own personal life, or you could probably think of a historical example of how different places around the world have been impacted by the movement of people, goods, or ideas from one place to another. So that might be one thing that you'd like to discuss with your teacher in class. Now, when we talk about movement, there are really 2 concepts that are important to understanding movement, and how really time and place and technology have changed the concepts of movement. We have what's called friction of distance. Now, when we talk about friction of distance, what we're looking at is how does distance play a role in one place's impact on another. Okay, so in what way does distance interfere with the interaction of one place or another? Because when we think of interaction of place, what we know is that as you get further and further from a place of influence, we talked about this with the nodal regions, as you get further and further away from a place of influence, the less influence that place is going to have. And so that is shown through the friction of distance. Distance acts as a friction. It acts as something that hinders the interaction with, or the importance of one place over another. Now, what we've seen is that over time, especially as we move forward in time with our improvements in technologies, and you could probably think of some in your head as far as what has caused this. The interaction between places has gotten easier, and so really this concept of friction of distance has started to lessen and lessen and lessen, especially in those places that are of the most developed countries. Now, if you go to some parts of the world, the different rainforests, the Amazon rainforest, maybe you go to maybe the Congo region of Africa, the bush of Australia, where it's very harsh physical environment, very low levels of development. Still, you would see this concept of friction of distance because of how difficult it is going to be to travel from one place to another. But in the more developed regions of the world, this idea of friction of distance really doesn't play as much of a role, because places of extreme significance and importance are really able to have an impact on other places regardless of distance. Through the internet and almost instantaneous communication of email and video conference and video chatting, or whether it's things like trading stocks over the internet, whatever it happens to be. Again, and then that's changed with improved technology over time. Now, we see this idea of the lessening of friction and distance through this concept of what's called space-time compression. And basically what we mean by space-time compression is this fact that what's happened over time is, because of new modes of information technology and transportation, it doesn't take us quite as long to get from one place to another, and it doesn't take information quite as long, it doesn't take goods quite as long. So you can think about the impact that that's going to have on people and the landscape. So you have this idea of this increased connectivity due to increased technology. And again, it's not just information technology, but it's also transportation technology as well. You think about highways and cars and rail and planes and things along those lines. And so what we have here is just a graphic to kind of illustrate this particular point. So you'll notice there are a couple different examples here. So the very first example you see here is Columbus in 1492. It took him 37 days to sail from Spain over here to the Caribbean. Our next example here is Titanic. If it was supposed to take about 80 hours to travel from Ireland to New York. Then you have Lindbergh, who flew the Atlantic from New York to Paris in 1927. So notice 1492 to 1912. Okay, we have an improvement of maybe about 35 days or so. Actually, no, it'd be what is that? Let's say 33 days or so, from 37 days to about 80 hours. Then you cut that in a little over half in the next 15 years. So it takes us from 1492 to 1912 to reduce travel across the Atlantic by about 33 days, and we cut that time in half, another 15 years. And then from 1927 to 1962, just less than 40 years later, we're orbiting the world in 5 hours because of space travel. So this is just an illustration of that idea of space-time compression. Now, when we talk about space-time compression, really what we have to understand is that this is more of a perception than it is really a reality. We know that the absolute distance from New York to London does not change at all. However, what changes is our perception of the distance between London and New York, or Europe and New York. Because of our ability to move much more quickly, we perceive the disconnect between the two as much less. So really, instead of an absolute difference or change in space, really what we're talking about is a relative change in space. And so that's just to get us started on this idea of movement. Again, movement is incredibly important, or the study of movement is incredibly important to the study of geography, because it helps us to better understand the interaction between spaces.